Hello and welcome to this lesson. HTML block and inline elements. We have used a couple of these elements in our previous lessons, but I want to take some time to explain what block and inline elements are. So, HTML elements generally have a default display value assigned to it. Uh, and these can generally be both either block or inline. So, what is a block element? A block elements are elements that always starts on a new line, right? And by default, right? So all these things I'm gonna say they can all be changed using some styling, but generally by default, and the emphasis is on default, they always start on a new line, right? And they take up the entire width of the space. So if it's the entire page, it takes up the entire page. So it takes up the entire width, and they generally have a top and a bottom margin. So examples of these, as you can see, is the address, article, aside, the block code, which we have looked at, the HR, your head H1 to H6, your headers, footers, and all that, UL and OL and all that, right? So we are going to be taking a look at one or two of these examples so we can actually get the understanding, but these are all block elements. The second type is the inline elements, and the characteristics of these elements is that it does not start on a new line, right? And it takes up just about the entire space that it needs, not the width of the space available. So that's the thing about inline. And examples of this is your anchor, right? And then you have a lot more here, your strong, your span. You might be looking at that. Your all this your select, your buttons, and all that are all inline elements. So I'm gonna just take you guys to the coding, and then we'll see how the differences look like. So the first of these that we'll look at is the block element type. And we're going to be looking at the div, which is by far the most common. So the div element is basically and most often used as a container for other HTML elements. It generally has no required attributes, right? But you can style it. You can use the class or the ID to select it and style it. And it's often used together with your styling sheet, your CSS, and then you can kind of like design whatever your container looks like. So let's take an example. So I'm gonna have my div block element, and because this is a container, let's say I can put in there other element, right? It hosts. And let's have my h2, which is like this is a block level element, right? Remember the h element is also a block element. And then let's have our p, uh, and then just say this is this is a paragraph. Okay, and then what else? Refresh this, and you can see that this is an element. You can see this took the entire width, right? So you see that this element just dropped to the bottom and takes the entire width. So that is our div, right, which is also a block element. Let's say we wanted to style this div a little bit. So let's style this so you can see what we're talking about. Let's put a background color, and we will see the boundaries of this div. So background color, let's say brown. So you can see it took the entire width right, of the page, right, that's in. And that's what block elements do, right? So let's put something else. Let's say wanted the color of this to be, let's say white, right? If I refresh this, you can see that everything is white, right? And what else? Let's pad this up a little bit. Yep. Let's say we wanted a padding of say 30 pixel, right? So then you can see it's been padded 30 pixels, right? So this is an example of a block element. And let's look at what an inline element is. An example that we'll be looking at, and maybe let me just do this again. It's always good to comment your code, right? Inline element type. And I'm going to be talking about the span, right? So in order to use the span, it goes together with it's like a paragraph or something. So let's first have our p tag, which is our paragraph element, and then okay, so we have our p tag, and then let's put in some content. I don't want to type a lot, so I'm just gonna put in the lorem stuff, which is some default texts, right? And then in here, I want to be able to uh, put a span, right? And the span is a container used to mark part of a text or part of a document or specific sections of your text or document that you have. And you can style it differently when you use it together with CSS, which is what we are going to do. So if I refresh this, you have your default text down here, right? But let's say I wanted to style just a couple of maybe just these differently, right? What I can do is I can put a span, right? Which is okay, let's put a span here, span element, and then I'm gonna close it. I'm gonna cut this off and then close it where I wanna close. So let's say I wanna close it I wanna close it here. So I wanna just style lorem ipsum all up to consector, which is I don't know what that is, but let's do that differently. So if I do this, you still see nothing, right? It shows you that it's Latin, but uh, let's style this differently. So I'm gonna put a style and say style, and then I'm gonna put color because I want to style the color, and to give me bold, give me red because I want that too. Or maybe let me check this color, royal blue. And if I click this, you can see that I just styled that section of text using the span, right? Because it's an inline block element, right? So that is the difference between inline and block. And by far, one of the most commonest is the one that we are using right now, which is the span element. So, in summary, there are two types of display values. We have the block and inline, and the block element always starts on a new line, and it takes the full width of the width available. And the inline one does not start on a new line. It only takes as much space, right, that you give it. And we just talked about the div and the span. So thanks for watching this lesson. See you in the next lesson.